Tropes. We all love to hate them. We all hate when we see cliche tropes in books, movies, or comics, or anything that you read. Yet for storytellers, taking a risk and doing something unique seems to doom them to failure and banish them to the realms of artistic obscurity. So they often resign to using tropes naturally, and many times use them wrong. In fact, there are 3 major ways that you're using tropes incorrectly, and I bet it's killing your storytelling. The first major mistake is perfectly summed up by this storyline synopsis. In a dark realm, young orphan Lily finds a magical amulet, granting her power over nature. Unaware of her destiny, she sets on a perilous journey with loyal friends to defeat an evil sorcerer. With newfound courage and friendship, she becomes the land's one true hope, destined to bring light to the shadows. Sound familiar? If your chosen one sirens are yelping on full blast, then my friend, you'd be absolutely right. This story, which I am definitely not reading, is so predictable that the words chosen one are practically leaping out of the screen and onto your face. And one major mistake with many storytellers is that they use tropes so excessively that their stories become predictable. Over-reliance on tropes that your audience really knows very well, like the chosen one trope, can lead to plots that become really irritatingly predictable. And the problem with this is it deprives the audience of the excitement of twists and turns that are unexpected. When storytelling becomes way too formulaic, it risks losing the ability to surprise your audience, and that will just leave them completely unsatisfied and disengaged. So how do we fix this, Fifi? Well, I think one way to fix this excessive usage of tropes is to embrace subversion. For anyone who doesn't know what subversion means, it just means to surprise. Surprise them with some kind of creative plot development that challenges their assumptions about what they think is going to happen. It's also important to focus on the growth of your individual characters in your story. If you make sure that it's their decisions and actions that drive the plot forward rather than external things and tropes, I bet you'll create a story that's really fresh and exciting, and no one will be able to guess what's going to happen next. Although excessive predictability definitely seems bad enough, that's not the only major trope mistake storytellers make. The next mistake is perhaps the most critical and incredibly harmful to any good story that you might be working on. And that is using tropes as a substitute for character development, aka binging TV tropes and running with the descriptions of all the tropes for your characters. When we create character designs, we have to do so much. We have to design how they look or describe how they look, create a backstory for them, figure out how they're going to fit in the overall plot. It's so understandable that at times you may just default to what TV tropes says an edgy hero should be like. But the major issue with that is that using stock character tropes without adding any sort of depth or complexity to that character can and will result in one-dimensional and uninteresting characters. And let me tell you right now, an audience will absolutely notice that. Misusing tropes to quickly create characters can eliminate any emotional connection between the audience and that character. And I personally think modern audiences are more privy than ever to this sort of thing. Instead, create a backstory for your character. Dive really deep into your character's background and their history, and create really colorful backstories that get at their behaviors and motivations. For each character in your story, I think you should have something fresh and unique as far as their backstory is concerned. Sure, it can refer to and be based off of common tropes, but it should really be uniquely them. And I think that's really how you make characters that stick with audiences for a lot longer. Additionally, I think you should also give your character some interesting and unique traits. Move beyond like standard trope definitions and give them something distinctive. You know, if you have the edgy hero, instead of that short black hair that covers their eyes, maybe they have a high top, maybe they have spiky blonde hair, something that's just a bit different than what the trope typically demands. Give them some kind of quirk or something like that to make them memorable and uniquely part of your story, not based off of the common definition of what characters with these sorts of personality leanings typically act like. I think this is going to serve you really well if you do that, because ultimately my position is that characters are the ones that drive the story forward, and so how you characterize them is so incredibly important. Now, you may do all of these things, create an amazing subversive plot that keeps your audience guessing what's going to happen next, have well-defined characters with super meaningful backstories, and your audience gets so attached to them, and you could still be using tropes incorrectly. I know, it's ridiculous, right? And this final mistake is what I think causes storytellers to create stories that no one wants to read, and that is not using tropes at all. That's right, tropes are not all bad and they're a fantastic tool for writing. We spoke a lot about overusage and we spoke a lot about, relying on them too heavily, but avoiding tropes altogether, I think, is the ultimate storytelling mistake with super unintended consequences. While they may seem like overused narrative cop-outs to some, they're not inherently evil. In fact, tropes have stood the test of time in literature for a reason. They resonate with audiences and provide a familiar structure that helps ground stories. Grounding your reader, grounding your audience in something that they can remember and that feels familiar to them is how you can bring them into your world without really trying too hard. And that's the power of tropes. Completely shunning them can lead to stories that feel too different and are hard for audiences to connect to. But tropes offer a somewhat shared language between the storyteller and the audience. They act as narrative shortcuts and they allow writers to convey super complex ideas really efficiently. By avoiding using them, you risk alienating your audience or creating narratives that are just way too abstract and confusing. Tropes can be used as a really good starting point to build upon, and it gives you a foundation that you can then get creative with. I think that a well-executed trope can create a really strong sense of familiarity in an audience, which can then create nostalgia, excitement, all the good feels that you want the people engaging with your story to have. So basically what I'm saying is that dismissing tropes entirely can be a seriously missed opportunity to leverage their strengths while also acknowledging their limitations. Instead of avoiding them outright, anyone telling a story should use them thoughtfully and purposely. Embracing them with a fresh perspective, blend them into your storytelling, subvert the traditional uses, that's how you create something that's thrilling and new, yet comfortably familiar for your audience. Now that you're aware of these 3 major ways that you might be using tropes wrong, you still need to figure out which tropes to use to tell the engaging story that your audience will love. Check out this video to see one trope that I think is a must-have in any good story. And I'll catch you next time. Bye!